what we're dealing with here. So they all came to Egypt. They lived there approximately 20 years, and they had it good in Egypt because of Jacob, or because of Joseph. And then in his last days, Jacob called together all of his sons to gather around me, and he would tell each one of them what would happen to them in the days to come. And then he named each one of them, and not only did he name them at 147 years old, but he knew their birth, how they were, their birth order. Yeah, he knew that at 147 years old. Not only that, he remembered the character of each one of his kids, and he went through all that in chapter 49. And then toward the end of chapter 49, he said that these sons of Jacob here represent the 12 tribes of Israel, and this is what their father had told his sons as he told them goodbye, and he blessed each one of them with an appropriate message. And then he said that when I die, I want to join my ancestors. Bury me with my father and my grandfather in the cave in the field of Ephron the Hittite. So Abraham, that's where Abraham and Sarah were buried, and that's where Isaac and his wife Rebekah were buried. That's where Jacob wanted to be buried. So when Jacob had finished this charge to his sons, he drew his feet into his bed, he breathed his last breath, and then joined his ancestors in death. And so then at the beginning of chapter 50, it says, Joseph threw himself on his father, he wept over him, and he kissed him. And then Joseph told the physicians who served him to embalm his father's body, so he was embalmed. And the embalming process took the usual 40 days. And the Egyptians mourned his death for 70 days. I wanted to read that to you because it's obvious that Joseph was there when his dad died. And the Bible is pretty clear about that. And also the fact that he was embalmed, and it was quite an elaborate process of, taking out the organs and making the body cavities so that it wouldn't, filling it with spices so that it wouldn't decay. And they were very good at that. And then the mourning for 70 days is important as well, because Joseph paid mourners to wail and cry for 70 days. And the reason 70 days is significant is because only a Pharaoh had more mourning than Joseph had for his dad. The Pharaoh had 72 days of mourning. So that's just a little Bible trivia for you. So pitfalls of grudges and guilt. We can only move forward when we embrace God's forgiveness. So a lot of this is about forgiving ourselves. I had told my wife many times that I was an outstanding driver in the snow. Growing up in northern Illinois, I had learned to handle the slick roads, and yet as we drove one of our sons to a party, she clearly doubted my skills. And the powder was sticking to the windshield, and she asked me to please slow down, and I rolled my eyes, and I promptly lost control of the vehicle. And then moments later, we were in the ditch, spinning our tires and having a marital moment in front of the kids. We were stuck because I wouldn't listen. It's one thing to be momentarily stuck in the snow, but many people live their whole lives stuck. It's not the snow that causes the problem, but the unforgiveness that surrounds them. Nothing prevents a person from moving forward like holding on to grudges. In this final session, Joseph had seen the plan of God in the decisions of his brothers that caused so much pain in his life. Let's take one more look at Joseph and see what he can teach us about looking at our own struggles in the light of God's grace. Thank God for his grace. Steve, do you have a book?
Yep.
Can you read the scripture, please? Thank you.
Who changed my books? I came in with the right one, and somehow I got the wrong one. Genesis chapter 50. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said to one another, "If Joseph is holding a grudge against us, he will certainly repay us for all the suffering we caused him." So they sent this message to Joseph: "Before he died, your father gave a command. Say this to Joseph: 'Please forgive your brother's transgression and your sin, the suffering they caused you. Therefore, please forgive the transgression of the servants of the God of your father.' Joseph wept when their message came to him. His brothers also came to him, bowed down before him, and said, 'We are your slaves.'"
So the reason I read parts of chapter 49 to you is because it says that his brothers sent a message to Joseph. Before he had died, your father gave this command that you would forgive your brothers of their transgressions and their sin. I believe they made that up. Because wouldn't Jacob have said that when he had all the brothers together and he was prophesying over them, wouldn't that be done face to face? I mean, that's something, all the families there, he's able to speak to all of his sons, and at that point, he probably would have said that. So, looking at their past character, especially of the 10 brothers, Benjamin was kind of a different story. He was more like Jacob. But those 10 brothers, they didn't have the greatest track record as being the best people. So I believe they made this up because they're carrying this guilt that they've had all these years. Now they've been in Egypt for 20 years. It was 40 years since they threw their brother in a well and concocted the story and put blood on his coat and took it back to his father and said he was eaten up by an animal. 40 years they're carrying this with them. So I believe they made this up because they're worried. Now that Dad's gone, what's going to be our fate because we treated our brother so terribly.
Well, it also implies that he wasn't there at the time that his father died.
Yeah.
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 Right.
Right.
He obviously went back to do whatever.
Mm-hmm. I believe there was probably a little lag time there, so it gave the opportunities for the brothers to kind of make this up. So that's my take on it, because something that important would have been done face to face, I believe. And through all of this, Joseph has already forgiven them. I mean, there's no reason for them to have angst, except that they're carrying this guilt. He's already said, he's provided for them in Egypt all this time, and provided some of the best farmland so that they had a place to grow crops, and they had food during the famine, and so he's treated them very well over this last 20 years.
Well, they're assuming that his character is the same as theirs.
Right.
Now that the father's gone,
Right.
he's going to retaliate.
Yep. And who do you think is behind those thoughts? It's the devil's behind those thoughts. Here their brother has forgiven them, and he said so. He said it, and he not only said he forgave them, he demonstrated it by providing for them. But the devil's good at what he does, and he's eating the lunch of these brothers. So now he says, we're your slaves. We'll do whatever you ask. They're thinking that their days are numbered here. So when Joseph's brothers made the trip to Egypt to find food, Joseph had revealed himself to them, and the brothers had a good reason to tremble. And they were now in the hands of a powerful Egyptian leader, and their guilt was undeniable. They thought the brother that they had wronged would extract harsh revenge on them and settle the score. Instead, they found Joseph to be compassionate, even willing to forget their crimes of the past. Joseph didn't want revenge. He wanted his family back. Consequently, the brothers fetched their father and their families and lived in Egypt under Joseph's protection for nearly 20 years. So all was going well until the day Jacob died, and as expected, the family went through the initial stages of mourning and the arrangements that were made for the burial in Canaan. But after the passing of their father, the brothers began to wonder if Joseph's love would now turn to hate. Should they expect cruel treatment for their past, the past that still haunted them? So yeah, they were of the world, right? That's the way the world thinks, you know. This person, you know, we wronged this person, and even though they say they've forgiven us, we're still carrying this worry that, and this fret that something might happen in the future. So has there been a time where you were glad that someone didn't hold a grudge against you?
Sure.
You know?
Saying too much.
Yeah, yeah,
You look at, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to hurt you, that kind of thing.
Right.
Absolutely.
yeah. Mm-hmm. Our mouth sometimes can't cash the check that we're
That's
writing.
I like that.
It gets, you know, gets us in trouble, our actions. But that's what's nice about being a Christian, is we can leave all that stuff. We can leave that worry. And we talked a little bit about it in men's group yesterday. You know, his yoke is easy. The Lord's yoke is easy. We leave that stuff with him for a reason.
Right.
So we don't have to carry it. Because, again, the devil's the prince of this world, and we can, you know, he can wreak havoc in our lives if we let him.
That's it.
So, you know, these brothers had a reason to feel paranoid. What they had done to Joseph all those years ago was deplorable. They had left him for dead and even sold him into slavery. But in Joseph's mind, their fears were unfounded. Still, they sent a message to Joseph explaining that before he died, their father, the message to what he had requested. Please forgive your brother's transgression, the suffering they caused you. We don't know if Jacob actually said that. His brothers used to regain the brothers' good graces. True to his past, Joseph was full of grace toward them, and he had truly buried the past. Wouldn't it be great if we could all just put the past behind us? So much of our so much of our pain in the present relates to old wounds that have never been allowed to heal. And by the grace of God, with his help, we can let go of grudges that weigh us down. A lot of times, I'd say probably all the time, we need the Lord to help us let those grudges go and forgive us of the mistakes that we've made in the past. The devil likes to bring that stuff up, but we have to remind him of his future when he does that. You know, he's a liar, and he's the father of lies. And he'll bring that stuff up, and he'll say things like, well, look what you did to them. You know, they'll never forgive you for what you did. And so you carry that instead of leaving it with the Lord and leaving it. He's got the yoke, and he's pulling the weight. You just got to let him pull it. Matthew 16:5 is a difficult verse. Jesus did not sugarcoat and call us to forgive, but if you don't forgive others, your Father will not forgive your offenses. To be a Christ-like follower is to mimic his ways with sinners. Just as the Lord forgives, we should as well. The cross canceled all grasping of grudges. Following Jesus means trusting God with all of our hearts and believing that even as he loves and forgives us, he empowers us to do the same. I don't necessarily care for the use of sinners there, his way with sinners, because that's the connotation is those that don't know Christ.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, people that know Christ are sinners as well. So I don't like that use of the word sinners when it refers to the lost. Unredeemed, lost, I like those type of words, but sinners, hey, that kind of says that, you know, Christians aren't, and we are.
Yes, sir.
I mean, we are, and we're living under grace every day. He allows us to learn from our mistakes and our sins. While Joseph's brothers thought that they had reason for fear, their brothers delayed their response. Their hearts were overflowing with gratitude when they realized that his anger was truly gone. Joseph had no plans to repay them. His only plans were to care for them. Their guilt was not caused by their brother's grudge. It was time to move ahead. Again, Joseph cried here, very emotional, a lot of trauma in his life. Why was he crying at this point, do you suppose?
Well, because he knew what his father had told them before they died, that they were going to go through some junk,
Yeah,
you know, and, they reaped what they sowed.
right. Yeah, as do we all, right? Reap what we sow.
And then they were, you know, all the tribes were put into bondage
Right,
that were left. Now the tribe of Joseph, but all the rest of the tribes were in bondage to the pharaohs and stuff.
right,
So they kind of reaped what they sowed.
right. I believe he was weeping for his brothers
Yeah.
in the way that they have not forgiven themselves. You know, he's probably coming to the realization, you know, here it is, 20 years later after I've given them the land of Goshen and they've been prosperous because, you know, of where they're living and who brought them there, but they're still carrying this weight. And he was weeping, I believe, for his brothers that were carrying this weight, you know. And, you know, we should weep for those that are carrying a weight too, and try to help them to release it and show them that Jesus forgives and people forgive. And you don't need to pick that up and you don't need to carry that. I mean, that forgiveness was done a long time ago at the cross. And, you know, this was long before the cross. It was probably hard for them to do that, not knowing that, you know, Jesus was going to come and die for their sins. But they should have known that their brother walked pretty close with the Lord, because he went from a well to the second most powerful man in the world because of the Lord and because of his relationship with him. Brother John, you want to read Genesis 50, 19 and 20, please?
So Joseph said to them, "Don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You planned evil against me. God planned it for good to bring about the present result, the survival of many people."
One of the most famous verses in the Bible. What you planned for evil, God meant for good. And Joseph has got the right attitude here, right? The attitude we should all have. What, you think I'm God? I'm not God. You know, I can't stand in judgment of you. You know, you need to accept the forgiveness of Christ so that you can be forgiven as well, because I can't condemn you. I can't do anything as far as my life goes. I can't take my life. I can't prolong my life 1 second longer than the Lord wants me to be here. And if you live that way, it dispels fear in your life. You know, with all the fear that's gone on with the pandemic and everything, if you've got God in the right place, that He is the holder of life and death, then that takes care of a lot of things, right? That takes care of your views on abortion. That takes care of all your views of life and death. It's in His hands.
Roger, I gotta say something about these verses. Something God showed me recently in this study when I was reading it long ago. When Brother John wrongs me, Brother John does something terrible to me, okay? It's real, okay? I think when John comes to me, he says, "Forgive me," I think from this text, a good way to put it would be, you know what? A lot of people say things like this, doesn't matter, you know, whatever. It does matter. In this text, he said, "You did this against me."
Mm-hmm.
So he's calling them out on it.
Right,
So in other words, there's accountability for what we do.
right,
And I think I'm trying to make more sense now. There's accountability. So John, yeah, you did wrong me, brother. John needs to know that.
right.
John needs to know that, yeah, you hurt me, you did evil against me,
Right.
but God is going to bring up, he's going to bring good from it.
Right.
Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
A
Yeah.
lot of times what we'll do is, well, it doesn't really matter. It does
Right.
matter.
Right.
That person needs to hear, you hurt me. You did this to me,
Yeah.
you know. So,
Yeah, people will come and say, you know, I forgive you. And the common Christian would say, brother, it's under the blood. I've already forgiven you. Christ has forgiven me. And that's true. But we should also say, yeah, you did hurt me.
and don't do it again.
Yeah, you hurt me. Let's not go there anymore. It's forgiven. I've forgiven you. Christ has forgiven me. Christ has forgiven you. Let's continue on. But you're right.
Amen.
Acknowledge that and not just sweep it under the rug and say, oh, it's okay. I've been forgiven, so you're forgiven. You know, they need to know.
Well, you don't let them have a chance to grow if they don't know what they did.
Exactly.
You take away a learning experience from them.
Exactly.
You tell them how they make you feel, I assume.
Well, I mean, we recently went through this in this church, and don't sit there and try to figure out. I hate that. But anyway, in the church, people come and said, I've messed up, I've hurt, I've done this. Yes, you have. Yes, you have. Don't do this again. We're not going to put up again with what we put up with before. Learn from this. Don't go back down that road again. Our people need to hear that, including me if I wrong something. You know, so I just want to, put that out there. God showed me that a while ago, and it really speaks volumes because people do need to hear. You know,
Yeah.
You did some damage here.
Right.
You hurt people here.
Yeah.
And we don't all find ourselves on both sides of that situation.
Absolutely.
Sometimes it's something so insignificant to you.
Yes.
When it comes out of your mouth, it offends them.
Yes.
But you don't know that. You didn't plan it.
Right.
Okay? But if you find out, you've got a strained relationship for some reason, maybe you need to find out why.
It's true.
But we'll both be on both sides of that coin.
Yep.
Yeah. Things our mouths get us in trouble. We don't even realize it. And as we grow, we realize what we can say to some people and what we can't. Some people are more self-conscious than others, and they have problems from the way they were brought up and things that they've gone through. When you say something that may be a joke to them, they take it to heart, because of their history, what they've gone through. And so once we find that out, we know we're not going to say that anymore.
Yes. It's true.
A good example with Mercy, I'm definitely not going to have, there might be some movies that I can watch that don't bother me, that there's sin portrayed and that don't bother me. But I know they're going to bother Mercy, so that's not going to be on the TV when Mercy comes over to visit, because her tolerances are different than mine. It doesn't mean that we're any different Christians. We're all forgiven, but their tolerances are different, You understand what I'm saying? People are different. And so sometimes we say something or we do something that we don't think it's any big deal because, it doesn't bother us in the same way that it bothers them. Verses 19 and 20 form a great crescendo of this grand story, Joseph's story, which comprises the largest portion of the book of Genesis. It now comes down to a climactic finale. Coming together is the sovereignty of God and the humility of human beings. So when we started this lesson, I talked about the sovereignty of God. The sovereignty of God or God's providence is when He uses natural things in our lives to bring about His desires, what He wants to have accomplished. Joseph was thrown into a well and then sold into slavery, and then he went to Potiphar's house and was lied on and ended up in prison. And then he met two people there and they forgot him. And then they remembered, and then all of a sudden he's in the house of Pharaoh, and he ends up taking care of all of Pharaoh's business and rises to the governor of Egypt. All those were natural things that God was using in His providence. Now, miracles are different. Miracles are God does things unnaturally. Parting the water of the Red Sea and things like that are miracles. And God uses those as well. But I believe in His providence, He uses natural things that happen to us during our lives to bring about what He's going to have done. And it's going to be good. It's going to be. All things work together for our good for those that love Him. So He's working behind the scenes in His providence. And He's doing that in Joseph's life, but He does that in our life as well. You know, He's working behind the scenes.
I had no doubt that God was preparing me in my years of corrections for ministry. I know it sounds horrible, but I believe that with all my heart. I really do. You have to be thick-skinned to be a pastor. Because you hear all kinds of stuff, trust me.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that when all those 12 years I worked in the prison life, that gave me the thick skin I needed to become a pastor.
Mm-hmm.
It really did.
Yeah.
So, he was preparing me.
Right.
I didn't realize it, but
Right.
he was.
Yeah.
You didn't think there were so many similarities between being a
Well,
prison person?
you know what's sad is, and I'm going to speak on that this morning. John MacArthur has had to defend a lot too. We're talking about defending the gospel. But anyway, most of our issues come from professing Christians. It really does. And it's not the lost world. We don't care what we do here. It's professing Christians that will, yeah. And so you have to get real thick. When I first started, I thought everybody loved the pastor. That's how stupid I was. I mean, I'm serious. It was a heart attack. I went home one night, this woman told me, I mean, she let me, I walked in her house, and she wouldn't even look at me. She turned her back to me the whole time. Wouldn't even look at me. And I'm trying to work this out. You can leave my house. And I'm saying, well, you just don't treat people that way.
Yeah.
You don't. Well, I got in my car, looked at my wife, and I said, man, I thought everybody loved the pastor.
Yeah.
So, but God was preparing me, and our house had just rented in Dixon. I was so upset. I said, let's just go back to the house in Dixon and say, we can't stay, there's another family in there. We got to go to the parsonage, you know. So, but yeah, I mean, I learned a lot.
And that was God's providence too.
Absolutely.
If that house was empty, you might have been back there.
That's right. That's a good point, because I was getting, I'm like, man, I don't know, I didn't sign up for this stuff, man. People can be downright nasty.
Yeah.
That's some of the worst hurt you'll have.
That's right. And it hurts because you don't expect that from the church people.
Right.
You don't expect that from Christians, you know. When I use the word Christian lightly there.
Yeah. Well, professing Christians.
Professing, yeah, there you go.
Those
It's a
that
better word.
say they are, but they don't live it. Notice the question that Joseph asked his brothers, am I in place of God? We should often ask ourselves that same question in our sinful nature. We make frequent attempts to sit on the throne and call the shots, even though scriptures continually remind us of God's sovereign lordship. You know, Christians should really know this. I mean, especially Christians. We should know this. Now, politicians, they put themselves in place of God all the time, or people with power, or you know, people with a lot of money, and finance their sin and get away with it because they have enough power to get away with it, to stay out of the court system, to stay away from the police, and do things that are deplorable because of their money and their power. And they, I'm sure, in their mindset, can put them in place of God. You know, I'm above the law, I'm above God, I am God. You know, that type of thing, that mindset. So, you know, a big part of the life of a Christian is submission and being humble, and know your place. You know. Corey Ten Boom says forgiveness is an act of the will, and the will can function regardless of the temperature of the heart. So you may still have angst against your brother in the heart, but you have to actively go to them and say, hey, we got a problem here that we need to work out, regardless of your heart. Yeah, Steve.
In that manner, he's not in the room, but I forced Marty to call his sister this morning, and there was a warm welcome. So I think that was a wonderful thing to see, or hear, I guess.
Amen.
So he talked to her for a few minutes before he came in, and they have not talked for a couple months, and that was,
Right.
that was something that it was weighing on my heart dramatically.